Welcome back to another Relatively Damaged Live. My name is Angela, and
I'm Kat.
the live shows are currently streamed on Mondays to Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Please follow and subscribe and share with your friends. On the Monday segment of the show, Kat and I discuss topics we find interesting for 30 minutes. So let's get to today's topic. Who suffers most when we are filled with hatred? Ouch.
Mhm.
Ouch. Did you want me to go ahead with the quote or do you want to do it today?
You go ahead.
Are you sure?
I am sure.
We got two. Okay. Booker T. Washington said, "Don't let any person bring you so low as to hate them." And then I'm trying to remember if we got I think we may have gotten this out of a book. So it continues. I think it's out of The Places That Scare You by Pima Chodron. Who really suffers most when we're filled with hatred? The key here is that we betray ourselves more than anyone else. And then Pima says later, we don't intentionally choose pain. We just do what's familiar, which isn't always the best idea. I had that lately. Like, I had this situation. Oh, and this is pre-recorded, guys. Just so you know, we're coming on live. We're pre-recorded though because we had some things we needed to get done, so we couldn't show up live. And we love you guys and don't want you to miss this. So these are important to us. But I'll tell you, it was like a freight train, Kat. Okay, so I'm thinking about how good it is that I wasn't gossiping about anyone. And then it was like I got sick. I didn't feel good. And one of my sisters calls, and I'm like, blah, I'm not going to say anything, but you really need to talk to so and so and blah, 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 blah. It was like a freight train. And I saw it. I saw it coming. In fact, I'd been like, no, that's not the behavior. That's not the behavior I want to have. That's not the behavior. This is going to create a tremendous problem, and there will be contention, and which of course all breeds hatred and things like that. And so while I was in my best state of mind, I could slow myself down and not do anything about it. And when I was not feeling so good, it was just like finally this release happened. It was like I just couldn't hold on to it anymore. I couldn't, and I hadn't totally, I don't think, processed what was going on inside of me. So it was just like an inevitable crash, like the whitewater rafting. If you look at the rock, you will inevitably hit the rock. Dude, I crashed and burned.
Never been whitewater rafting, so I don't have that experience. But
oh no, I haven't crashed and burned whitewater rafting, but certainly in my relationships or with things I'm trying not to do, I crashed and burned.
You're just using that metaphor. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I will say that has been my experience too. Um, so I'm thinking back to various things, and so I have a problem with so and so. Somebody said something or did something, and it got under my skin for whatever reason. And if I would choose to gossip about it, if I would choose to stew on it, if I would start thinking of how can I get back at them, they hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you. And I let those thoughts into my head. Really, who is it hurting? Because truth is I'm not going to do something. It's like I get to that point until, oh yeah, I'm not really going to do something. You know, um, but the thought, the gossip, and especially if somebody agrees with you, that it's just like, oh yeah, they're a horrible person, and then you feel justified into feeling the way that you do about something, and it feeds. It's like it's like the endless monster that just keeps consuming itself and grows bigger every time it consumes itself.
Yeah.
And so, realizing that all I'm really doing is hurting myself. And seeing that anger and letting that anger overtake me, whether it be in a personal way or whether it be over the state of the world, in the huge broad sense or anywhere in between. It's it, it, it all it does is cause that internal strife, and I'm making that physical face because that's what it does to me. And so I do think there's a different way.
Yeah, I it's so funny because I know there's a different way, and yet I still ended up in that situation. And I don't know if it was processing it, that I really hadn't like reconciled in my mind. Because I do also think sometimes it's the stories we choose to hang on to, or the story we tell ourselves about what is happening. And
Hmm.
a lot of times I find that I tell these stories in my head that just aren't helpful. Like you're saying, it feeds that monster. And then what happens inside of me, this whole dysregulation thing, it's not just the emotion, it's that emotion impacts my body.
Mm.
As you know,
Hmm.
I have a pain disorder. My pain will get worse, or maybe my tummy will hurt. It just depends on sometimes on what's happening. But you know, I think it's important to reconcile or come up with maybe a better story from a perspective of love, because I really truly believe that maybe we just don't know what we're doing sometimes. Like in the scriptures, they know not what they do. How often have I done something and I had no idea it caused pain?
Isn't that the truth? And if somebody gets that courage to come back to you and to say what you said, or what you did hurt me, and that might not even be your intention, but then you're like, whoa. And it makes you think and it makes you look at that. So imagine how much, if we're holding those things inside of us, somebody did this or somebody said this, and we're holding that on, and we make this narrative of what their intentions are, um, which then we can justify feeling the way that we feel because we're saying their intentions were bad. Their intention was to hurt me. Their intention was to, be malicious. Um,
Well, and maybe subconsciously it that is what is happening from that person. I just want to throw that out there. They may not even know that they're doing, but I also want to acknowledge that if it's subconscious, then they don't even know they're doing it, right?
exactly. Like if we were to hurt the other person and they would come back and tell us, our
Right.
conscious, I would like to think I'm a person of integrity, and I wouldn't purposely go and hurt people. So if I step back, then I'm like, what am I doing? Is there something in my unconscious going on, or or just something? And I have to look at my behavior in that context, why they were offended.
Right.
Um,
But
and
don't
if apology is owed, give that.
Well, and I think you also have to be open to hear that feedback, right? Because if let's say something's going on between you and you come to me and I'm like bull crap cat, there's no way I do that, and instead of taking a moment to look inside of myself, do I do that? I might. I mean,
Right.
that's the thing. When I stay open to it, to the feedback, I think I was reading in Energize Your Heart. Um, it said something to the effect that people are going to tell us stuff when they're in those crazed emotions, those hatred, those dysregulating and contentious
Mm-hmm.
emotions. And there's always a speck of truth in it. So take what we like and leave the rest. Take what we can relate to, or take what we believe our part is, and give the rest back. And I think that's so important.
And even sometimes I would even take it a step further. Sometimes there is no, let's say I said something and, let's say you said, because this is kind of a bulky kind of sweater here, and you said, God, Kat, why are you wearing clothes that are too big on you? It looks silly. Just take something like that. And so I could either say, well, you know, that's your opinion, and just let it go off. But I'd have to acknowledge that the truth is that it's bulky and it's kind of big. But what you may not realize is it's cold here today.
And you're really, really comfortable, probably, is
And
what
I
I'm
am
thinking.
comfortable in this big bulky thing, and so it's less about how it looks and more about being comfortable.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so so I have to take it. I would have to take that as, okay. I could take it as you're being offensive to me, because what business is it of yours of how I look? But I could also say, well, maybe she's concerned because she knows I'm on camera and doesn't want me to look like a total slob. Um, you
But
know
wouldn't but
those kinds of things.
but wouldn't that be more about me than it is about you? That
it,
the
it could very well
comment,
be.
the comment of that's baggy could be more about what I think is supposed to be right, like,
It,
and oh, I just get myself in all kinds of trouble when I think I'm right.
and here I'm going to add a little thing, not just right, but because you could be right for you, it's about right for other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so it is right for me right now to wear this big bulky sweater.
Okay. Yeah, and I have a question that's coming up because I'm thinking people are probably wondering, at least, this has been an ongoing conversation for me with a friend of mine about how do you become one heart, one mind, which I think is what a little bit of what we're talking about when we're shifting from
Hmm.
hatred into love.
Hmm.
That, so what are some of the tools or things you do that help you when that offense happens or that hatred seeps into your life? Because it's going to happen. I don't think any of us can get away from it. I keep thinking I'm going to, but it's just not happening.
you, you know so if it's somebody I have a relationship with, it's always, why do I have that relationship? Because there's got to be some value in it. um, be it a work relationship, which I have to value because we're working together. And so it is up to me to do my part to make that harmonious so that we can accomplish the goal of why we were getting paid. Um, in a friendship or family, I keep those relationships open because they have meaning to me and to do that. So when, my mother, you should do this and you should do that. Um, wear sunscreen, make sure you wear a hat. I have to be able to say, okay, mom, I'm an adult. I know these things. Or I can say, mom, okay, mom, yeah, you're right. Knowing that she's coming from the place of love. So it's all on how I take it. So if I decide that I'm going to take that as the your presentation may not be the best, but if the place that you're coming from is that place of love, for me, I shouldn't take offense at what you're doing, because what my mom has for me in that instance is my best interest at heart.
Yeah.
So I have to keep that in mind, that if I'm having a relationship with someone, it's because we have that mutual affection and caring and love for each other, that we
Mhm.
want to to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's that, and then there's people who you don't have a relationship with at all, the stranger on the street. And how do you deal with that? How do you deal with, I mean, I've had to deal um with hatred at gay pride parades, people just spewing venom. I've had instances where people just accused me for no reason at all of you know being a discriminating racist, just because my skin is white. um and you know I don't know what to do with that. But except to realize that that's coming from them, that is coming from where they're at, and there's nothing that I can do. I'm just a target that represents that inner hatred that they have.
Mm. Yeah, and I think you're reminding me of I think it was a quote I posted. Well, it will be a few weeks ago by the time this goes live, but noticing differences is smart. Noticing similarities is wise, or something to that effect. Like recognizing that underneath this, there's more similarity than there is different, whether it's our beliefs, our skin color, our political affiliation, our where we stand on COVID.
Exactly.
That's a big deal right now. That's why I'm throwing it in there.
I had a conversation on that earlier today. So, um,
Right.
yes, that's it exactly. So, and sometimes those differences is what causes or what blocks the similarities going
Right.
on. In mentioning the COVID, I was having a discussion, and it was, we obviously came at it from different ways, but we had to come back to this whole thing. Yes, we want this to be over. And really, at this point in time, does it matter what happened in the past, who did what, how the virus situation was politicized? What really matters now is how we deal with it at this present time in this present reality,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
coming up with a common sense solution so that we can go forward and have people's best interest at heart.
You know, that's a lot like my frustrated email that I sent to a school recently. And towards the end, we're 3 years into this, and you know, gosh, it's just so sad. It's like there's this idea still that we're going to go back to quote unquote normal. Well, normal is what's happening right now. Why? Because it's happening right now. This is the reality of it, right? If this is where we're at, this is what is normal. This moment is the only moment that exists is now, right? I mean, if we go from that perspective, and I said, I think that we might need to do some, rethinking, because we're being told that there's not enough support, not enough staff, excuse me, to get one of the kids their homework, that she needs to just do it, and that I need to coordinate it all, and my hands don't work, and I have a caregiver that has to help me, and anyway, so it's just this huge mess. And I just, at the end of the email, it's like, we've got to do better for everybody, not just for the students, but for you guys too, because this increased dysregulation it creates the contention, which in turn creates the hatred, which then creates the divisiveness. And so how can we do better? I think that's the big question. How can we accept what's happening and shift? so that we're not in these dynamic, icky situations.
Well, and that is really the whole problem right there is we're not talking to each other. I have the solution for me. So this is what's going to happen, and you push that out there. So this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do, because this is what I'm going to do, and that's it. And there's not those conversations to say, okay, here's the issues I'm facing. What issues are you facing?
Right.
And I remember going back to my working days, and I'm thinking about all these problems. So everything was interconnected. What one person did affected two or three other people down the line, and it was all in this circular thing. So I was always about looking at the problem. What is the problem and who can do what? So if I see a problem and I say, if I spent an extra half minute to do something that's going to save you 5 minutes of time, it's worth it for me to do that because I'm looking at the whole issue. Because if I
Right.
didn't do that, they'd have to recreate a lot of what I did or figure out what I did to go back and fix the problem. So if I were to do this one piece that would help them not to have to recreate that, it just made so much sense. And so if people come together and you understand not just your part, but you understand everybody's role, then you can come up with a common sense solution to how we deal with problems. And we can do it on a small scale, and it's much harder to do it on a larger scale because there's so many more people involved in complexity in that.
Yeah.
But you can start in the home. you know
Yeah.
it's easier to wash the dishes if you after you're done and at least rinse it out.
Right.
I mean, simple things like that. So it's not ground in and you have to really scrub it and do that. Putting a little water in it, you know, rinsing it
Yeah.
out will help that. It's just common sense solution for a simple problem, but it involves cooperation of all the parties.
Mhm.
And that's that care and that concern that the greater good, it has to be kept in mind. So if I see you as lazy, incompetent, stupid, whatever I decide to put on you, and that's coming from that hatred, that's not giving you a chance to say, well, what's the issue? What's going on here? And giving you a chance to explain, well, this is why, or
Yeah.
this is what I need. Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, I just,
That's
such great points because I'm just thinking about the current situation I'm dealing with as far as like the child in school and things like that. And I think that there is probably that sense of, well, she's just lazy or she's just this, and instead we're dealing with other, there are many other things involved. And it could just be also that they're overstressed. The staff is, it is, apparently the school we're in has so many people out sick with COVID. It, students and staff, like the most in the district.
wow.
So I could only imagine the amount of stress, and I've tried to engage in that, acknowledge that emotion. I know you guys are frustrated. Now I'm becoming frustrated. And if we don't find our way back to that common ground, then it's going to get really hard. And I've got a child that's starting to shut down, quite literally, is overwhelmed. And what happens when she's overwhelmed is she shuts down and just stops. And something hit me today that I never thought of before. When I miss work, there are things that happen daily, right? When I would work, there are things that would happen daily. And then there were things that only I did or whatever, but those
Hmm.
daily things would get handled when I wasn't there because they were daily things, right? Well,
Hmm.
these kids, when they miss school, we pretend as if it wasn't missed, basically, and they have to go back and do all of that work. And you get the same amount of days as you were absent to to get that work done. And I thought I mean, today is the first time I even really thought of that, of how
Mm,
difficult that must be, that no one helped pick up some of that slack while you're gone. Not that they could, because it's learning, but there's and the lack of support that happens after someone's sick. You know, it just was the first time it ever hit me. Oh my gosh, we are so hard on these kids. And as adults, it's much less stressful. I go to work, I know I have a team. I'm in school, there's no team.
right,
There's you
right.
and the work, you know?
Well, and that's going to get into a whole nother subject, which I would love to tackle one day. Um, but yeah, that's it. And the idea of stress, the idea that at work you're expected to hit certain guidelines. There are things you're expected to do daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, whatever. And depending on what it is, you will have that assistance to get that done. Obviously, if you're on vacation or you're sick, someone will have to fill in and go get those daily tasks done. If
Yeah.
you're off longer, somebody might have to get the weekly tasks done, so on and so forth. But there is that backup. With learning, the problem is there is a goalpost, and the goalpost doesn't shift. So there is that catch up that is needed to get, because you have to get to that goal, and the goal doesn't shift.
Yeah.
And so that creates problems for the kids, and they get so stressed.
Yeah. And then
Um,
and that's where I'm going. Like then they start hating school and hating teachers. I mean, I've seen it in my home. They get so
mhm.
frustrated. It's just like, I hate this teacher, and then the teachers aren't supportive. And then the teachers start taking things personally. So, like, as we get to rounding out the end of the conversation, it's like, how does everybody shift? How do we all, I mean, is it taking a pause? Do we learn heart rhythm meditation? Do what do we do to help slow this down a little bit?
it, it it's honestly, I think, having those conversations. In saying all this, it reminded me of a movie, and the title of it eludes me right now. But it was about a man who was in the KKK. He was like, not the Grand Wizard, but one of those in this town. And so there was, at the time, the hatred of blacks. And he eventually came and renounced his KKK membership and actually had a friendship um, with this black woman. And I have to remember that. But I remember seeing that movie, and it was a perfect example of how somebody who had this hatred for whatever reason, either it being a totally irrational thing because you were taught that way, or something that developed because of lack of communication. The key to both of those and solving those is having that communication, that coming to of an understanding, like you said, focusing on the similarities and realizing we're much more similar than we think. And so, if the teachers would understand that the students are frustrated, and the students would understand that the teachers are frustrated, and the parents would understand that everybody's frustrated, all three could get together, hopefully, and come up with a solution.
Well, and I think acknowledging that. I think we have to acknowledge and talk about those emotions. In high stakes negotiations, they do that. They check in and they talk about it, because if they don't, they know everything can go to crap. And if I don't get through some of these, if I'm worried about something and I don't talk about that concern, then especially in a high stakes negotiation, the negotiation doesn't complete itself. It just doesn't.
Now, I have a question. What do you mean by high stakes negotiation?
I
Are those typically financial transactions?
I'm thinking, well, if it was, I read, oh gosh, what is his name? He was an FBI negotiator. Voss is the last name.
Oh, like hostage negotiations, things like
Yep,
that?
he was a hostage.
Okay.
Like, even especially in hostage negotiation, they've got to check in.
Right. Okay. So I say that, like, so hostage negotiations. people's lives are at stake.
Yeah.
So we put a certain value on lives, that we want to save those lives. We put a value on money. We have high stakes negotiation when there's business mergers or business acquisitions and things like that. Why don't we apply those same principles to our day to day living? Because in reality, you know, is your child going to die because the school situation is not resolved? Probably not.
Right.
But isn't her mental health and well-being, isn't her love for learning, her need for an education that important that it should be considered a high stakes for everybody who's involved?
Well, and I think too for those teachers and the school staff, I think that it is high stakes for everyone, because those
Yeah.
emotions, once those dysregulating emotions set in and they take hold, if we don't know how to find our way back to the regulating emotions, to the love and the kindness and the compassion, then it really does take us down a new trajectory. And it's like it's like bruising an apple. And if you put that bruised apple in with all the other apples, it doesn't take long before the basket's bad.
What a great analogy.
So, thank you. Yeah, I guess we're at the end of our time, huh?
We are, and I mean, I could keep going on and on and on, especially since we're in schools. But
I know. Well, we'll have to add that for, maybe we'll do another one.
yes.
There's also a Relatively Damaged podcast where I interview amazing guests who've overcome some sort of struggle in their lives and how they found hope and healing. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and many more. I'm Angela, and this is
Kat.
We'll see you